Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have Elaine Benfield on. She is a software marketing executive and relationship guru who lives in Atlanta. She's also very active in human rights campaigns and volunteers with different dog charities. Welcome to the podcast, Elaine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Elaine also has her own podcast called Her Stories, and you can check that out on Apple and Spotify, and also check out her website, herstories.com. She's got some really great content, some videos on there. I looked at it over the week, and she's got some good stuff on there, so check it out. Today Elaine is on my show today to talk about a couple of topics. So her husband has come out as gay. Is that correct, Elaine?
Yes, now ex-husband, but yes, we were together for 22 years. Mm-hmm.
Great. And I can't wait to hear the story about that. And then also her daughter is trans. Is that also correct?
Also correct. My 19-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So let's start with your husband first. So you were married for 22 years. And Did he come out? Tell me the story. How did he come out to you? When did you find out when you were married or after you stopped being married? What's the story?
Yes, so it's approaching almost 2 years ago. My husband at the time ended up going on a trip. He came home and was acting kind of interesting. And I knew him so well. We were together for 22 years. At that time, we were married for about 19 years.
Okay.
And he said, I cheated on you.
Oh.
And we had, I thought, a good relationship and really was my best friend. And when he said it, I just took the air out. And my first response was, so who was she?
Right.
And his response was, it wasn't a she, it was a he.
Wow.
And I I'm sorry, what? And it was so caught me off guard because that had to have been the last thing I thought he'd ever say.
Yes.
And at the time, I loved him so, every ounce of me thought,
yes.
Hey, it took a moment, the devastation, the cheating, was he safe? And all the factors. And, there was a moment in time where I thought, okay, well, is this a new relationship? Could it be, and he kept saying it's gay plus one, you're my one. And, you go through this after 20 years and I have a stepdaughter and 2 other kids. And, how do you make it work? What kind of life do you want? What kind of marriage do you want? But then in October, and I was just turning 50, it literally was a month before I turned 50. And I thought this whole year was going to be the best year ever. And I'm like, all of a sudden I start to see my world crumble. And then in October of the year, he ended up confessing. I was on a business trip in New York and he kept bugging me and saying, oh, I really want to talk to you. I really want to talk to you. I'm like, I'm in the middle of the bed. And he ended up saying, I've been cheating on you for 10 years with hundreds of people.
Oh, no.
And and I threw up a lot, like my emotions, my stomach. So I was going up and down and up and down. And, you hear that and you just can't actually comprehend it.
Yeah.
When, who was it with? Where was I? Was it ever in my house? Was it ever I had all those questions.
And were you worried about STDs and
everything?
Everything.
Your first thought is my, and when I found out you cheated on me, I did go to the doctor, get all these tests, had a scare moment. One doctor read the test wrong.
Oh,
that
no.
I just, B and I'm just this. And then, I did go to a few doctors and everyone's like, you're okay. Obviously he was safe. But then the October comes around and it's I just kept getting tested going. And he was very, he was like, no, I never, I was always careful. But here's someone who I didn't know would do that to me ever. How would I ever believe faith coming from someone who's betrayed me for all these years?
Did you ever suspect it at all throughout your marriage, that 10 years?
No, that's the wild part. There were certain things that he liked that, I would say, oh, it's a little kinky. That's his thing.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, he was my partner.
Yeah.
We were in a happy marriage as I thought. We had a good life together. We traveled together. We had our alone trips together. I never thought, obviously, just blew my mind.
And how did you meet 22 years ago?
He was an executive at a software company and I worked with him. And so I remember seeing him and just was he was so smart and he was captivating and just saw him speak in front of 500 people and just completely fell madly in love with him. And he was getting over his first marriage and, he had a daughter. So I ended up becoming a stepmom to a 2-year-old. And,
Okay.
so all these, I thought we had a really great life, but, now in reflection, he really had a double life. And I know I hear these stories, but it's true.
And was he traveling a lot and that's where he was doing it? Or was it happening where you lived as well?
Well, and I was one of those people, you'll get to know me. I was like, I sent a group, like one of those notes on your iPhone and just did it shared and had, here's my 10 questions. Like where was it? Was it ever in my bed? Was it ever? And he was so honest because I said, I deserve to know these. He was never in our house. He met people through dating apps. He would be traveling and hook up all these random cities. And I was an executive too, where we both were traveling. Our lives intersected, but I was on the road a lot too. We were raising 3 little kids.
Yes.
Was I too busy with my career? Was he too busy with his? But I never in my wildest dreams thought, oh, he's going on a trip to London. He's going to cheat on me. Like I would never, I never looked at anyone. I never kissed anyone else. I was married.
You were faithful.
I was faithful and blind. Part of my challenge was, and therapy's done wonders, I had blind faith. I never questioned it.
And then, so after you found out he was doing this for 10 years, did you have him or did you move out? Did you start the separation process right away?
So when I found out he cheated, I thought we could make it work.
Okay.
At one point, we put the house on the market. We thought maybe we'd get 2 homes. Maybe there's a way we start this new life. He told me, I was totally open to him. Like maybe he goes, that's a lunch date. Don't hook up anything with anyone. Just be honest with me.
Yeah.
Like, is this a new way to do our marriage? Is this what needs to happen? Do we have a third in our marriage? I was open to, I loved him that much that maybe there's another guy that I'm interested in that would like both of us. Like, I'm being very honest. I was open to every possibility at that moment.
Yeah. When you love somebody, you're open to things. Yeah.
And is it a new relationship? I didn't want to lose him. I kept thinking I didn't want to lose him. When October came around and that shell shock, my kids came to me, all 3 of them, and said, I don't think he's good for you anymore.
Right.
This is not the marriage that you should. And remember, my kids are also at the time, 23, 18, and 17. So it's what's best for all of us, or maybe a little younger, 16, whatever, but they're all, young adults. And we got through Thanksgiving. He was doing mushrooms and just kind of, figuring this out. He started talking about a guy that he met. And then I chose to go. We always went to Mexico for 5 days, every year.
Okay.
I chose to go to Mexico. It was like, I tracked his phone. I kind of knew he'd sneak out he'd leave at 11 o'clock at night, come home at 6 a.m. And
oh, wow.
And so I started seeing, and I wanted him to explore, but then it became so unhealthy for me. And my kids were like, don't take him on vacation. Go to Mexico by yourself. And even my friends and my sister were like, you're mad. And I knew I knew I needed closure. And I went on this trip and it was good points, bad points, but I remember we left the hotel, I put on sunglasses and cried in the car, knowing I'll never be in a car with him again. I'll never be on a plane with him again. Like I took photos and snapshots of this moment going, this is the end.
Yes.
And we came home from what I thought was a fairly good trip. He left to go see his, at the time, the guy he was dating. And he came back the next morning and I said, you're moving out.
Yeah.
Like you've reached my breaking. I don't know if he was surprised, but it was this isn't the life I want. But I had to get to that point on vacation to go, this is what I need to say. Oh, it's a farewell to what I.
Well, you had some time to reflect maybe on the vacation where you had some quiet time in your mind to actually figure out what was good for you. So that was probably
100%. And no one understood it at the time. And now in reflection, you can look at my Instagram. I post a picture of, the vacations that I'll always cherish these memories. And a few of my close inner circle girlfriends were like, she's figuring out her next move.
Yeah.
And then, I contacted a lawyer. And then in January, I'll never forget, we went to lunch. He was already, moved out. He found an apartment. I got the house with the kids. Of course, I was the one financially stable, so I could do this. And we looked at each other across the table and he started crying, saying, I've fallen in love with my boyfriend. And I looked at him and I remember my girlfriend said, don't cry. Whatever you do, don't cry at that moment. She's like, cry to me before, cry to me after.
Yeah.
Stay you, be Elaine. And I remember looked at him and said, well, then this is done. Our journey's over.
Yeah.
And I remember the next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. January 3rd. I always say my day of infamy. Couldn't get out of bed. My kids had to feed me food, bring me. And I was like hysterical all day long. And my youngest child came to me. And I've said this before. I said, I'm so sorry you're seeing me like this. And he said, I'm so happy to see you vulnerable. I've never seen you like this.
Yeah.
And, you're going to get up and this is going to be okay. This is your worst day. He left the room and I took a shower and remember said, no one will ever make me feel this way.
I love that.
Again. And it was that rock bottom.
Yep.
And then I found a lawyer and we were friends for the spring. And then we got divorced last August. And what I found in between was he actually was with his boyfriend. He lied about the timeline. He was with him really to 18 months before we got divorced.
Wow.
And I just,
And your stepchild that he brought into the marriage, was that stepchild kind of sound like they were siding with you? Is that correct?
Yeah, my stepdaughter, she did. She moved back even, here we are with this challenging divorce. My younger senior, my other daughter's, trans, going through changes. And then I'm going through this monumental shift in my life. I've known her since she's 2. At this point, she's
your daughter.
She's my, she's a wonderful mother, great stepdad, but she's my girl. Like we've been to 2 years of age, 20 years. She moved back from New York and moved in with me. So we all together in the fall, we made it work. We just needed each other to create this new life. The 4 of us are now a unit. And we got through some hard parts of, hey, I was a tough mom. But therapy taught me I'm a better mom now. The things I've learned about myself through the divorce, I think I'm a better listener, mom, and don't jump, there's certain things that traits of moms, whatever, women and whatnot.
And is that why you started your podcast, Her Stories, after the divorce, or did this happen before?
Interesting. I had the idea 4 to 5 years ago.
Okay.
In honesty, I put my ex-husband first. I put him on a pedestal. I'm not saying I didn't have a great life, and I always did what I wanted to do, and I've, traveled with girlfriends and whatnot. But to me, I came up with this concept of here I am hearing inspiring women all day long in my career, all day long in my personal life. I want to tell women's stories.
Yeah.
So the minute he moved out, I got the rights to herstories.com. I ended up, starting to do interviewing, bought the sign, did the website, and did everything myself.
I love that.
Just to create this outlet and this voice. But then, as you know, then all of a sudden it becomes, people are like, well, your story is really unique. How can you tell your story?
Yeah.
But how do I tell women you can get through this? How can I tell men you can get through this?
Yeah.
How can I not? In the end, I feel I'm so happy my ex found he should be living his authentic self.
Yes.
He didn't need to do the damage he did to get there. That's his burden he has to live with for the rest of his life. I would hope other people listening would go, you know what? I am not being honest. I understand the ramifications, but you can't have best of both worlds.
Yeah.
You need your partner to hear the reality of what the truth is. And that I would have made, would I have married him if I would have known these were the traits? Probably not.
Yeah.
But I told the kids I would do it over again in a heartbeat because I have 3 of them.
You got the 3. Yeah, exactly. So that made it worth it all. Have you thought about writing a book?
So it's interesting, this is only part of the story as you can,
Yes.
I shattered my ankle in October. I the house has been a few times almost foreclosed. There's been so much around. And what my friends and anyone that knows me is the word that comes to mind is resilient.
Yes. You sound very resilient.
I get back up. Now I'm having a situation with work and I'm looking for a new job. And you look and go, how many hits can a person take? And my friends are like, your book on resilience is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And that's a common theme that what I would love to do is take these Her Stories, interviews and really help tell everyone's story of resilience. And a lot of the questions I get, why are you not interviewing famous people? I love that. I love famous people. But to me, it's the everyday person.
Yeah.
And to me, my goal has always been a book. I'd love to do a TED Talk and just how do you pick yourself up? how do you, survive anything? Each of us has something we have to overcome. And how do you do it? And how do you give yourself mercy on, there's going to be those days that you're like pile of tears on the ground. And then there's days where you're like, oh my God, I didn't know I could be this happy again.
Yeah. I mean, your energy is so positive and good. I think that, the resilient piece shines from you. So yeah. Are you friends with him still now? Are you just co-parenting and just it's minimum? Like, what is your relationship now?
So there was a moment where I thought, how am I ever not going to have him as my best friend?
Yeah.
It was my first morning hello, my last night hello, goodbye, good night.
Yeah.
And it took me months to not have that yearning. We texted, we kept in touch. We saw each other, like our 20th anniversary, we went to dinner. We cried. And then after the divorce, he's like, I'm going to move in with my boyfriend. But then there was no financial support for the kids, and he was still doing drugs, and he was, delusional. And I chose that it wasn't healthy once again. And I honestly yielded myself to help protect the kids. The kids didn't talk to him too much for a while. They're building a relationship with again. He's now, my understanding, not doing drugs. I've seen him, my son graduate from high school. My other, my daughter's a drummer. I've been around him. I didn't see him from September until May.
Wow.
Also a very strange, but my sister was here, my mother-in-law, our former nanny. And it was an interesting thing to be around everyone that has supported me to get to this point. He came into our world. He is an outsider now.
Okay.
He did that to himself. If he would have come to me and said, I have these feelings 10 years ago, I honestly would be having him and his partner at the dinner table. That's just what I couldn't even imagine. That would have been the scenario. He altered his future. He's not part of my life. And in fairness, he doesn't deserve to be.
Yeah.
I wish it could be different, maybe over time.
Yeah.
But cheated on me 18 months into her. Your boyfriend's not my home.
Have you met his partner?
I've had to text him a couple times. My kids have met him once or twice. My mother-in-law, I think, once. I'm still very close with his mom.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a room with him because I think my first reaction would be like, you're a fucking asshole. Like, you could have told him to come forward and say, if you guys knew you had a connection from the start, be an adult.
Be honest. Yeah.
And the fact I never got sick and the fact that I didn't have I said, the question is, everyone always asks, was it with men? Was it with men and women? I'm like, I think it was with anything. He was trying to find an escape to really figure out who he was meant to be. And I just was awake. He loved me being that executive, the person on his arm, raising his kids, earning money. And he just created this, shelter, 2 lives.
And does he try to keep up a relationship with the children now at this point?
He's trying again.
Okay.
Like, I give him credit, and the kids are like, he's not the manic crazy. He thought he was going to be, well through in the Kardashians. Like, he lost his bloody mind. And I can only imagine. I think mushrooms unleashed, he found out, like, he figured out he was abused as a child and whatever. All these things that I think were dormant, mushrooms did something to unleash it, but then also made him a little batshit crazy.
Right.
And so I think he is trying to figure out his new life.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go bankrupt. He's lost everything. But I think the kids are resilient. My stepdaughter said, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me saying, she's like, I'll never forget.
Yeah.
What he did to us, we're never going to forget.
Yeah.
But he's your dad. And I'm like, absolutely. You deserve to have your father. He was an amazing father all those years. He just lost his mind the last few years. And he needs
You're an amazing mother for even saying that, though. So you really have to pat yourself on the back for that, because amazing that you are that forgiving and saying he's your father still. So that's amazing.
No, and I think, it was interesting at the graduation, the kids, Alexander came to me, my youngest, and said, oh, can dad go to dinner? And I told him months before, I said, I don't know if I want dad being at dinner.
Yeah.
Then Alexander came up to me and he's like, I really want dad to be part of our dinner. And I was like, you know what? Let me ask his mom. So I'm like, do you care? And then we all decided it's the right thing for Alexander. And so I went up to him and said, hey, if you want to come to dinner, you're more than welcome. He's like, are you sure? And I said, we've discussed it as a family, and Alexander wants you there. And it was, shockingly, I mean, I think everyone's drinking at the table and everyone's waiting for us to have these weird interactions. My nanny's in between us. And he at the end gave a great toast and was like, if it wasn't for Elaine, helping be everything to the kids while I couldn't. And I felt that was very well deserved. And then I came home and my kids were like, you're amazing. Like, we really appreciate you having him there. It meant a lot to all of us. And in the end, my sister and I talked and I said, you know what it is? I'm indifferent. I love Taylor Swift. And she has a great saying, and I quote her all the time of, you don't have to forgive. You don't have to forget. You become indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
My heart doesn't skip a beat. I'm in love with him. He's someone from my past that I'm thankful that I have these children.
Yep.
But my life has moved on exponentially since he's gone. And that's a good thing. Her stories, I found my voice and it's indifference.
And have you started thinking about dating yourself now that your divorce is and you're free?
So it's it's funny. I had to get to this point, it'll be a year in August that I'm divorced. And it's all my friends are so excited. They want to be part of the dating, like, ooh, who can we set her up and who's going to be sitting at our table and who's going to be part of our traveling. And but with selling the house and starting over and ankle surgery, and I wasn't ready to give my 100% to someone. And so I'm hopefully moving in the next few months. And then I'm now super excited about that next step. I'm super nervous. Like, I can be honest. I haven't kissed anyone else in 25 years. Like, he is zaps for it. Like, I just, it's so
it's
different.
A whole new world.
I'm scared, but I'm also, I'm going to be ready. I didn't want, I went on a couple dates and I was like, I'm just not into this yet.
Yeah.
And I'm now healed. I'm over, my ex, and I'm like, okay, then someone hopefully will fit in my world that I've, truly created financially for myself, build myself back up. And they can be part of this happy, they don't need to see what was, really the last 2 years. So
I love that. I think my prediction, you're going to meet somebody that is your soulmate that you were meant to be with. So you thought he was, but I mean, you're going to find that right guy.
I hope so. Like, and I've had a lot of friends that were like, you really need to date. It's really hard being 51 looking. And I'm like, but if you're not into it and you're not ready.
Yeah, you got to do it when you're ready.
And I know I'm not, yes, everyone's like, you need to have fun. I will put in quotes. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait for that. But until I'm ready.
Yeah.
And then whatever that leads to. But it's a little nerve wracking. I'm like, oh my God, what am I, like 18 again? But
well, I would love to have you back on the show once you find that guy, and we could talk about that or do check-ins with about your dating life.
So, like, are we allowed? Like, it's been really funny. I have a few great close friends that have kids, and they're all like, we're part of the process. Yeah. I forget what they call it. Like, they want to do some review, and I'm like, oh my God, it'll be really. I feel sorry for who's coming in. You've got like this whole network of people.
Yeah.
Like, you need
to go through a panel interview to get.
And they're like, we need to intervene first. And but it's fun that, I also think if someone doesn't come in my life, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Because I think we always put relationships are such an important part. But sometimes, hey, maybe I'm destined to not meet someone or whatever that scenario, whatever it's meant to be is going to be.
So let's shift and talk about your daughter. So you, whenever we got in touch with each other, you're like, well, I think I'd be perfect for your podcast because I have a gay ex-husband and I have a trans daughter. So tell me about your daughter and how your daughter approached you and where is that relationship at now?
Sure. Yeah. So it's here's, as I joke, my year of my 50th birth in February, a few months before Steve cheated on me and came out, my daughter, I was taking her to a doctor's appointment right down the road, and she sat in the front seat, like talking, and she's, was 17 at the time, and said, I have a friend who is transitioning and feels trapped in the body, they're in. And I just didn't even blink and said, do you feel you're trapped in the wrong body?
Okay, great.
And she looked at me and said, yes. And so I remember driving home and was like, did that really just happen? And so she, within 5 days of having this, as they call light bulb moment,
Yeah.
came to me and said, here's this, here's what I'm thinking. And had to understand because, for me, just being older, pronouns are hard sometimes. I never mean any harm, but, my stepdaughter has a lot of friends, that they've gone through many transitions. I'm always like, oh, I don't want to get the pronoun wrong. So at first, my biggest thing was, what's the pronoun? How do I change my mindset? This is a child's, that I birthed.
Yeah.
Like, and the first thing you say when a child's born is, what's the gender?
Yeah.
So in your mind, it was definitely hard, but then also it made sense for some reason. She struggled her whole life. She had some medical challenges. She never fit in. She always was a little ostracized. She had impulse control, super high IQ. I can't explain how within a month, I was like, this was what was always meant to be. I was accepting right from the start. I struggled with pronouns, and she'll tell you the same.
Yeah.
Hardest moment was, she picked her own name. She picked Hannah.
Okay.
And not to say the dead name, that was tough. You pick the name when you have a kid.
Yeah.
You have a kid at 17 who's like, well, I'm going to be 18 in a few months. I'm going to do this with or without you. And then we had to have the talk of, I'm always going to be supportive, but let's see your pediatrician. Let's find, luckily in Atlanta, there's a fabulous queer med organization, doctors that help through HRT.
Okay.
I did everything. And I will truly say, I didn't want to hold her back. I wanted to be educated. What if she changes her mind? What if, these are all questions parents have. And so we, from February until pretty much April, May, were just doing the due diligence.
Okay.
She was super anxious. She really wanted to start HRT. But I wanted to make sure, at those moments, the audience might know you have a choice. If you want to have children later in life, before you start HRT from a boy transitioning to a girl, you have moments where you cannot have children.
Yes.
And so these are the hard decisions of, I'm helping have my child make a decision at 17 that will impact the rest of their life.
Yeah.
But I had enough doctors and support and therapists. And it just every day made more sense that this was what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So sorry, my Alexa's going off somewhere else. So it was just the right decision. And I do think this is where life is kind of interesting. My ex-husband came out then in July. So did Hannah coming out saying, I'm a trans girl, let him finally see someone being authentic? I 100% think he let him finally be free.
Yep. I was thinking that.
It's the call. And in fairness, I get questions a lot on, how did Hannah know to come to you? How did Hannah know you're going to be okay?
Yeah.
And here I was behind the scenes for years. I was co-chair of Pride in Atlanta for my software company. I was going to Pride Parade. But that's just I volunteered at LGBTQ plus, homeless, organizations to help kids that are struggling.
Yeah.
I was doing that. They didn't know me not doing it. So I think because of me being who I am and who I believe, love is love, equality, everything.
Yeah.
Hannah didn't even question I wasn't going to accept her. And that's a gift that I think most parents, you have to let them know you're going to love them no matter what. It's my kid. I don't care what she calls herself. She can call herself anything. Don't care. That's my baby.
Yeah. It's not as common. It's common for parents to disown and completely cut their children out just for coming out as gay or bi or queer. And the fact that she talked about transitioning, and you accepted that, that's amazing. She is so lucky to have you as her mother. That's amazing.
And I want to say my ex-husband was amazing. The two kids are amazing. No one, then you go, you start telling your friends and your family and you start, you start expanding. I've been so lucky. Maybe there's a couple of people that, I don't want to say shun us, that are like, oh, she's got this weird life. I think people judge me and I'm like, I don't care. You're closed doors. Whatever happens to you, just because I'm super open and everyone's seen what happened in my life doesn't mean my life's worse. I'm so proud of my daughter. She was going to college for computer science and did a 180. She's now a drummer. She's going to music school. I've never seen her happier. And what? I was going to stop her from being this incredible woman that she's meant to be? I can't even imagine. And you said it. The suicide rates are astronomical. I think it breaks my heart. And I do know scenarios where the alternative has happened. Yeah. And it wasn't even a blip in my mind that as long as my biggest fear is protecting my child.
Yeah.
I think you and I could talk about governments getting involved and all this. That's a whole nother conversation. But to me, I'll do anything to protect all these kids' rights. I marched down in, the Capitol in Atlanta. Just let these poor children, there isn't an alternative.
Yeah.
And
it's who they are.
It's who they are. And some of them have such hard lives, as you mentioned. Like, what can I do to help a parent understand?
Yeah.
And I interviewed Hannah on my podcast, and I have a fabulous, colleague who said, "Oh my God, I've never heard a trans person speak." And she said, but to hear, she's just a young adult.
Yeah.
And so she shared the story. And if we can help tell the story of, this is not the path in life I thought, but it's the path in life I was given.
Yeah.
And I'm being more proud of her, especially, for this, seeing her, honestly, who she's meant to be. This is who she's meant to be.
That is amazing. So, I mean, you should be so proud of yourself as a human being for, just accepting her. You should be proud of yourself also just for getting through what you had to go through with your ex-husband. I mean,
you can't even.
And resilient is the name of your book for sure, because you are so resilient, and that's amazing.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So many people say, what was harder? I think a lot of parents and a lot of people will say, oh, it's harder if you have, the trans daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's not. It's harder having a cheating ex-husband that's gay. Like that, hands down, is so much harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I can't actually even explain to people. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that I did all the work and we took our time and made sure that everything was okay.
Yeah.
But this was every direction. I definitely think it was harder losing my best friend and changing my whole, what I thought was my life.
I would agree. That would be very tough, especially after that long being together and we just had no idea. I can't even, if I put myself in your scenario, I couldn't even imagine what my reaction would be. I think you handled it better probably than most, I would say.
Well, and people, it's interesting because I've definitely done a lot of reflection where there's signs, he at some point was like, but I told you this. And I'm like, did you ever come out and say you liked this? Like, no, and I'm sure it was in passing in a weird conversation that I didn't grasp. Like, now I can look back and be like, oh, well, maybe. And then it's like, no, you don't piece life that way together.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's moments where it's like, but in fairness, I didn't see lipstick on a collar. It's not that central 1950s where you're like, oh, he must be cheating.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. I didn't notice it. That's the interesting, like, I also wasn't looking.
Yeah, you weren't, that's what I was going to say. You weren't looking at his phone to see his text message because you didn't suspect anything, right? That's what it's just, if you think it's a happy marriage and there's nothing wrong, then how can you're not looking.
No, you're not looking. And the weird part was after he left, had to pick up the pieces, his name's on a lot of like the utilities and had someone come from a phone company and they're like, do you know you have an extra server? Like, what are you talking about? So he was doing stuff that I just wasn't looking. He had an extra server for probably doing shady crap. And it's like, but I didn't even know. And I'm like, oh my God, things started coming. Like, I think he had another cell phone number. He was so good at it that I joke, the kids and I are like, what a weird season of Netflix. Like, where are we like, when's season 2 going to be better? But those are the things I'm like, oh, he was doing a lot of stuff so shady that now I'm like, that's how I never found out. That's how I never knew. And, and if it's all true or not, or maybe who knows what it was for, but I'm like, but I don't need to know anymore.
It's sad though that I think it's sad in a couple of levels. One, that he did this to you, and two, that he couldn't live his authentic life, that he had to have 2 separate lives, like you said, for 10 years.
And 2 wives. He was married for 30 years total between his first wife and me.
Oh my goodness.
30 years of this. And I think kids today don't understand. I do believe you're growing up in like 1966 in Atlanta.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you're an evangelical church, your father's, in the Navy. This was not acceptable.
No.
I can comprehend to some degree, he tried so hard. And I do think he loves women. I do think he definitely loved his ex-wife, my stepdaughter's mom. And I do believe deep down he really loved me too at some point. I question a lot because if you really love someone, you would never do this. But in the end, I hope kids don't have to hide this anymore. Is his story one to say, my God, you wasted 56 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Not being with, hey, if his partner's his soulmate, which he's told me, which I also think's not very nice. I met the love of my life. It's that's his own. But he deserves it, as I do, as we all do.
Yeah.
I hope the next generations won't have to hide who they are. And
Me
people
too.
just be accepting of everyone.
Well, kids are coming out earlier now, and kids are, like your daughter are talking about, they want to, they're not waiting until they're 30 or 40 to transition and stuff. So, I think the world is becoming a more open place, and I think that, like you kind of mentioned before, let's see what happens with the government and with things over the next, several months. And I think that will, however the election ends up, which I won't get into that, I think that will also be telling as well.
But if there's more people like you and me who say this is okay, and we tell someone in our inner circle and our friends and family, Hannah's made it safe to be different.
Yeah, exactly.
Different isn't a bad thing, because is she really that different? She's herself.
Yeah.
She's herself. And that's where I hope at some point, no matter what our government tries to do, there's going to be us with signs helping. What can we do to make a difference that eventually this wouldn't be a non-discussion? Yeah. HRT should be covered, hormone replacement therapy, be covered under insurance. If a parent wants your child to have it, I don't care what age, that is the parent's decision.
I read an article about just, an article I read is that doing the HRT is actually saving children's lives because they're not going off and committing suicide because they're able to be who they are meant to be. So,
there's a correlation between that. We're going to be reading studies forever saying that, doing that is literally saving lives and just protecting kids that just they know, and having, I'm so thankful I had the doctors help explain, hey, this is the way most people come out as trans, because I didn't know. Either they know right away when they're really little, they start transitioning into another milestone, end of high school, beginning of, college, or transitioning then, or later in life. Those are the three, that is pretty much, those are the areas. Yes, there's people in between, but those are the milestones that I'm glad Hannah didn't have to wait till she was in her, any other age, but, a young adult to be like, wait a second.
I grew up in Miami and in the 90s, and there were in South Beach, and there were a lot of transgender people, and they were getting illegal hormones, at that point. And can you imagine we have no idea what they were injecting in their body? So, which is horrible.
I know. Well, and I look at it like one of my friends said, well, is an HRT what we get with perimenopause? I'm like, yes, it is. It's the same meds for women in their late ages. So it's so it's safe. And as you said, Hannah has a friend who ended up doing illegal, ordering by mail. Yeah. Who knows what she had and
exactly.
Not more frightening than, oh my God, what was put in her body, where I'm like, oh, I know, I monitor, I'm, handling my healthcare. I know all the stuff, make sure she's okay.
Well, you're an excellent mom, so congratulations to you. So that's amazing.
They'll say sometimes. They won't say all the time, but
I'm telling you that you're a terrific mom. So that's just amazing, the support that you gave to her, and it sounds like your other children get the same support. So thank you so much for being on. Again, please visit herstories.com. Check out Elaine's podcast, Her Stories. It's on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Her website, again, is really amazing. Some good videos on there. Take a look at that. And thanks so much for being on, Elaine. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.